Hi, and welcome to our video policy update. My name is Kathleen Taylor, and I'm the Policy Director and Convener for IACED. Today we will be reviewing the 2016 General Assembly session, wrapping up the items that are of interest to our membership and the membership of A&O's network. And I'm joined today by my colleague.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Clayton. I'm the manager of the Indiana Assets and Opportunity Network, which is a statewide coalition working to build assets for low-wealth Hoosiers.
Absolutely.
Kathleen, do you want to go ahead and give a little bit of context on the big issues that were discussed during the session?
Yeah, so it's important to know the context and the hot topics that legislators were dealing with. Even in a short session, there was a lot on their plate. High on the list was infrastructure spending. They approved $800 million over 2 years to deal with those continuing issues. Healthcare, there were a couple of bills passed, one dealing with new restrictions on abortion procedures, another one dealing with pharmacists and Sudafed in an effort to cut down on methamphetamine production in the state. A lot of the fallout last year from the Religious Freedom Restoration Act led to people thinking that there would be a lot of action on LGBT legislation in terms of whether it was a protected class or not. But those bills did not move at all, and they were also unable to come to an agreement on the bias crimes legislation. So that was one issue up for a lot of speculation that didn't get the action that people expected. Lastly, education issues were a primary focus of debate, where our state repealed I-STEP testing and has to create a new standardized test for students. And they were also looking to protect teacher pay and school grades as a result from last year's test results. So even though our world is predominantly focused on community development legislation and negotiations around that, it sets a nice framework to see what were the key issues legislators were dealing with.
So do you want to go ahead and jump into IACED's policy priorities for 2016?
Sure. So our main policy priorities fell under an umbrella of three core issue areas, including preserving and expanding asset development opportunities, preserving and expanding affordable housing opportunities, and also combating vacant and abandoned property throughout the state. And we'll touch on some of the specifics of the outcomes of those bills. But generally, that is the layout of our priorities. What about A&O?
Yeah, so we do have three top policy priorities for 2016 based on partner survey feedback. Our top three is eliminating asset limits, reforming payday lending, predatory lending, and then also preserving and expanding the earned income tax credit.
So on those policy issues, do you feel after the session that you had one accomplishment that you feel most proud of?
Yeah, I think often the process is a part of the accomplishment. Just talking to partners and coalitions and just engaging with one another about the issues at hand. But one specifically that I'm most proud of is the defense our partners made in pushing HB 1340, which is an ugly long-term installment loan, and we stopped it from passing, so it will actually be sent to summer study session. It ultimately would have been a dangerous option for working class families. It was a $1,000 loan, 6-month term, and the annual percentage rate was 180%, which this APR is technically loan sharking because it's 5 times above the standard 36% APR on installment loans lower than $2,000. So we were really proud of that action that it did not pass, and we'll continuously fight this fight on the predatory lending side. And then also, big success was HB 325, the Individual Development Accounts IDA Enhancement Bill, which now allows participants in this match savings program to use their savings on car ownership and then also home rehab and repair, as well as the furthering education, buying a home, and starting a business. So do you want to jump into some of the successes you feel like?
Yeah, so I would agree. SB 325 that you mentioned, the IDA Enhancements Bill, was the product of a coalition partnership between A&O, the Institute, and IACED, and we think that will represent exciting new changes for having a true impact in Hoosiers' lives as they try to develop wealth, become economically sufficient. We think those will have a huge impact. referencing something earlier that you said, that the process is sometimes part of the victory, even if you don't all the way get to the finish line with your result you wanted. That was certainly the case with our property tax exemption legislation. We discussed it at length in our last video, but SB 225 attempted to provide a clear, objective definition of what is charitable in terms of property tax exemption as it relates to affordable rental housing. It was a very narrowly constructed bill, and really wanted to get at the intent of serving those most in need. It did progress past the Senate. It was not heard in the House, although because it was eligible for conference committees, since it passed the Senate, we were able to get it inserted to a conference committee report only to have it stripped on the very last day. But what happened with that is that we were assured summer study committee in this case. Sometimes it means bills go to die. Sometimes it means that they really will study it. And we were assured by legislators that they will absolutely pay attention to this issue and hear from our members as to what issues they're facing regarding that. So victory in the process. Lastly, I would say SB 310, which was a bill that was designed to allow for streamlining the way cities and localities are dealing with vacant and abandoned property, making it simpler for them to put those properties back into productive use. The primary functional pieces of that bill were unfortunately restricted to be a Lake County pilot program. I will add, though, that several pieces of 310 were technical changes and corrections designed to address unintended consequences from previous years' vacant property legislation. So those pieces will be a benefit to members throughout the state, and we will be looking to kind of continue on discussing how we can help cities and towns deal with the problem of vacancy. So were there any other organizations that you can think of or legislators that were particularly effective in helping push forward A&O network priorities?
Sure. We look primarily to the Indiana Institute for Working Families as a co-led organization with the Indiana Assets and Opportunity Network. So really, we look to them to build those relationships and, push the bills on the issues that are important to the network. But one individual and organization, I guess, that stands out in terms of the HB 1340, the payday loan, is Steve Huffman, the executive director of Brightpoint, also IACED board chair. He came to the State House to testify against the bill and really to talk about the effects of payday loans, and also touched on alternatives to payday loans. And Brightpoint, as well as Homestead Consulting, a member of IACED in Lafayette, Indiana, are offering an employer-based small dollar loan product with community lending centers. It's a loan that is $1,000 max, up to 12-month repayment, and it's through your employer. So the employer partners with Brightpoint and Homestead Consulting, and the lending goes through a separate CDFI, through Homestead and Brightpoint, and the individual repays that loan over the course of 12 months through payroll deduction. So this is a new product, really exciting. It started in Texas, so it's technically a franchise and has shown really a lot of success. So we are excited to be a part of that product moving forward.
Yeah, and I remember during testimony, a lot of coalition partners, including IACD, testified, and several legislators remarked that Steve Huffman's testimony was particularly persuasive as they made their decision to not allow that bill to advance and send it to study.
So outside of Steve Huffman being a champion and the Institute for Working Families, were there any legislators or organizations, coalitions that you felt were primarily, champions in ICB's?
Absolutely. So it takes a village to move community development legislation, and we certainly found some new champions this session that we were excited about, including Senator Messmer, who led the IDA bill, and directly was supportive of TRICAP, an organization in his district that would benefit from those enhancements. Senator Doug Eckerty, he's the champion of our property tax exemption bill, was particularly effective in helping reach out to his colleagues to explain this issue. Representative Tim Brown, who is the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, so in a position of prominence in determining what bills move forward and do not, was very helpful in mitigating some of the detrimental impacts of SB 309, which if you watched our previous video, you will know that it sought to repeal the low-income housing exemption or pilot agreements that low-income housing tax credit projects can have in place in counties. That bill moved forward, but Tim Brown was successful in getting existing pilot programs grandfathered in, and also including a provision to protect habitat properties, for instance. So anytime a property is conveyed upon a nonprofit for a low-income individual to become a homeowner. So that was, I think, an unintended consequence of the bill, but he provided protections there. Beyond legislators, we rely on a strong network of coalition partners, including Leading Age, who was instrumental in helping us with SB 225. They're an organization that helps low-income seniors, and particularly has dealt with the affordable rental housing issue with the tax appeals. Also, the ICHS, the Coalition for Human Services, and the Association of United Ways here in Indiana, they remain strong partners throughout session, and we help one another kind of keep track of what's going on. And the Institute for Working Families, which helped with SB 325, our IDA bill. So we are thrilled that we had a lot of success and developed a lot of new partnerships and strengthened existing ones as we move forward. I'm interested to talk a little bit about how this year's policy outcomes will affect next year's strategy in our policy work.
With the A&O network, we will probably send out another survey to gauge interest and kind of engage our partners. Like I said earlier, the payday lending industry is strong, and we believe we'll continuously have to fight long-term installment loan options. And there's this thing called flex loans now coming out. So I think that they're smart, and they'll keep pushing for more options to take advantage of consumers. As well as, every year we try to preserve and expand EITC. That is absolutely important to our partners. And then, breaking down barriers for Hoosiers. So eliminating asset limits, I'm sure, will still be an important issue moving forward. What about IACED?
Yeah, so we mentioned this briefly, but the Summer Study Committee on Property Tax Exemption will obviously lead to outcomes we hope to implement for next year to introduce similar legislation and to inform those efforts. We will have to work with our members to develop a strategy in response to the 309 passage dealing with the pilot agreements being sunset in 2020. Also, we are going to be looking again at helping our members implement the changes from the IDA bill, making sure that on the ground those changes are helping clients around the state so we can tell that story to legislators.
Telling member stories really allows us to see the true impact of our work here at IACED. Kathleen, do you mind highlighting some of our members that helped in this session?
Absolutely. We relied on a number of our members to help advise us on legislation, to come and testify, and have direct member meetings. So I want to highlight a couple of those folks. First and foremost, Tammy DeWitt and Neil Elkins with TRICAP came up and were able to offer very powerful testimony on the IDA enhancement bill, and Senator Messmer introduced them as they were his constituents. In addition to that, Mark Lindenlaubs, who a number of our members will recognize from hearing his story dealing with property tax exemption issues with Thrive Alliance, he offered really compelling testimony on the 225 hearing where that bill was heard on the Senate side. We also heard from John Niederman, who helped weigh in on both SB 309 and SB 225, looking at the member impact for organizations like Pathfinders, which is his. In addition to that, Jody with New Hope Services down in Jeffersonville, Indiana, also weighed in on the 309 pilot exemption. So we had a lot of member engagement and would encourage all members to continue being involved in as much capacity as they can. And would like to talk a little bit about how you can get more involved. For instance, to be involved with the A&O network, what would be the best way to get in touch?
Sure. you can go to our website, indianaopportunity.net, and you can follow our blog if you go to Network Updates. And you can directly email me at kclayton@iaced.org. And you can also follow us on Twitter, IN_AO_network as well. How about IACED?
For IACED, if you're looking specifically to get engaged on policy, please go to www.iaced.org/services and look under the Public Policy and Advocacy section. You will find our Action Center where we have action alerts, surveys, and also a chance for you to contact your representatives directly. Or you can follow us on Twitter as well at INComDev. And we'll have some information for you in the slides after this. I think that wraps it up for our 2016 General Assembly review. We thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for more updates. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.